Hello, and welcome to the No Bad Questions podcast, where I try to learn in a conversational manner by sitting down with people who have interesting careers, important lessons to tell, or inspiring stories. I hope that you learn something too. If you want to support the podcast, please follow or subscribe on your platform of choice. You can also like or comment to boost the algorithms or share out to your network to make sure it gets more views. But ultimately, and what I hope you choose to do, is listen to the very end. With that, we'll start today's podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the No Bad Questions podcast. My guest today is Major General John F. Hussey. Major General Hussey enlisted in the U.S. Marine Corps in June of 1984. He served in the Reserve and the National Guard while he attended Officer Candidate School, graduating in 1988, and was branched as a military police officer. He served in a wide array of roles and theaters across his military career, including Desert Storm in Iraq, Bosnia, and Afghanistan. In 2005, he commanded the 306th MP Battalion at the Abu Ghraib prison, Iraq. Upon his return from Iraq, he accepted command of the 411th Civil Affairs Battalion. In July of 2008, he redeployed back to Iraq as part of a joint task force from the U.S. Special Operations Command. In more recent years, Major General Hussey was appointed the commander of the Great Lakes Training Division in Fort Sheridan, Illinois, where he was responsible for conducting mission command training at battalion and higher echelons. After completing his duty at Great Lakes, he served as the deputy commander of Joint Task Force Guantanamo. Major General Hussey holds a bachelorette degree and PhD in criminal justice and has 5 master's degrees, including a master's degree in strategic studies from the U.S. Army War College. Major General Hussey also has published several articles concerning detention operations and rule of law operations. He has a number of awards. They include the Defense Superior Service Medal, the Legion of Merit with Oak Leaf Cluster, Bronze Star Medal with 2 Oak Leaf Clusters, Defense Meritorious Service Medal, Meritorious Service Medal with 7 Oak Leaf Clusters, the Army Commendation Medal with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters, and many more. Major General Hussey retired from his civilian career after 34 years of service, culminating as a chief clerk in the Unified Court System of New York State. He and his wife, Janice, are the proud parents of 3 adult children, 2 of whom are serving in the U.S. military. He's been kind enough to let me call him John, despite all of that wonderful background. John, thank you for coming to speak with me on the podcast.
Well, David, thanks for having me. So let me just start out by saying, one, I recently retired from the Army Reserve as well back in August of this year. And secondly, as we spoke previously, I apologize for not being in a suit and tie. I thought we'd be only audio. So apologies to my audience. If I had known ahead of time, I would have been dressed appropriately. But I do have my military police shirt on, so I will carry forth the military police emblem. Please.
I imagine that most of the guests, most of the listeners will be quite forgiving and interested in what you have to say. And I want to start sort of in the career profile type of segment. A lot of folks may not know what the military police is or what it does. They may have an image of anything ranging from, swooping up folks who are AWOL to, the Abu Ghraib situation years ago, to maybe they're a fan of the Amazon show Jack Reacher, where he's a former military police detective. So I don't know who's got the right picture of what the military police is, if not you as a major general. So what is the military police?
So the military police are, they're basically on the battlefield. They have a wide variety of missions. And so, back here, mostly in garrison, people think they're at the gates. They're pulling over vehicles on base for people that are not following the rules and regulations, similar to, police officers in the civilian sector. And they do that. But what a lot of people don't realize is when we deploy to combat, we're patrolling what's called MSRs, main supply routes, and ASRs, alternate supply routes. And we're conducting that same kind of police presence to make sure convoys are safe. Now, one thing that is really eye-opening for the public is if I took an average infantry company of approximately 150 individuals, and then you look at my MP company, and it can change depending on what we call MTO, which is basically a modified table of organization and equipment, the structure of the unit. My MPs have more armament than an infantry company. I mean, every 4-person team that I'm sending out has an up-armored Humvee. They have basically an automatic grenade launcher. They've got individual weapon systems as well as a machine gun apparatus. So they're heavily equipped, well-armed, well-educated, and they offer a variety of different expertise. So they're out there patrolling what, again, MSRs. They're making sure, for example, in Iraq and Afghanistan, that insurgents are not laying IEDs, the roads are cleared. This way, troops that have to move forward can move forward, supply can move without hindrance. And that's very important if you're in full-scale combat operations, to make sure that ammunition gets up, medical supplies get up, wounded get back, and battlefield circulation continues, to include you don't want enemy prisoners of war on the main supply route. And you're also dealing with host nation law enforcement as well as dislocated civilians. So picture the refugee crisis you see anywhere around the globe, and our job is to keep that MSR clear. Now, we also do law enforcement. So, for example, if there are killings or war crimes or things of that nature, we have CID agents that train for that, and that's their expertise. And as a matter of fact, they're doing a lot of missions in our national capital region right now, guarding high security personnel, meaning Department of Defense high officials, both civilian and military. It's interesting because I was recently up at John Jay College in New York speaking, where one of the things we're seeing now more stability police. So if you go into a lot of these failed and fragile states, as well as post-conflict areas, there is an absence of rule of law, meaning the three stools: judiciary, corrections, and policing. So what we're looking at now is to try to get a little bit more involved in bringing that police expertise where a vacuum's been created, and go ahead and train new police forces or new correctional personnel in how to conduct democratic policing. And what do I mean by that? We want to make sure human rights are protected, minority individuals within that local area are protected. And then also, if we need to bring and start a new police agency, a correctional agency, that they do have females, because female in policing is very important. Because as we look around in the United States, 53% of our population is female. Well, that's not to say that's not in other parts of the world, for example, South America or the Middle East or Africa. So you want to make sure females are represented, and also minority groups, whether that be religious minority groups, because if not, then it's hard to establish a democratic rule of law where the full community has the understanding and appreciation of what rule of law is. So that's basically what the military police do. So it's a lot. It's a lot of background. And the good thing about both in the National Guard and the Army Reserve is we have many individuals that do that job in their civilian capacity. I can remember doing briefings where I had individuals that I had judges sitting in my audience, FBI agents, police chiefs, correction officers, and people from all gamuts of law enforcement sitting out in the audience. So we do have that expertise within the Army Reserve.
That's a great background, and I appreciate that. And one of the things I appreciate is I didn't know that about some of the, like you said, the post-conflict areas and how the military police were helping in those. Some of what you talked about I sort of already knew in researching, for today, but some of it I did not. So that's really fascinating. One of the things that you just mentioned is that folks in the reserve may, in their civilian life, also be police officers. Is there a major difference? Small differences, sure, but is there a major difference between how a civilian, police operates? Because obviously the last couple of years, how the police operate have been forefront in the news, and I don't want to turn this political. I'm just wanting to understand, is there a major difference between how a civilian police officer is going to operate versus a military police officer?
Absolutely. Well, let me go back to, I want to go back. One of the key roles, too, that the military police play is detention operations. So, those that might be familiar more, used to be called EPWs or POWs, prisoners of war, enemy prisoners of war. That is a full military police mission. And, not too many other branches of the military or nations around the world have the capacity to do what the United States does. And that's basically a big National Guard and Army Reserve, in particular, an Army Reserve mission. So let me go back to your question. Yes, military police on base, where you see them conducting law and order operations, are similar to military police or disregard police in the local community, except they are more confined to a base. People may not realize, but on base, there's a whole life cycle going on there. There's, for example, at West Point, you may have football games. At various other bases, you have, clubs and you have shopping centers, and people live on base. So
Right.
if there's what's traditionally a 9/11 emergency, maybe a kid stopped breathing, or if there's a domestic violence incident, those MPs respond, and they respond in a similar fashion. They've had similar training through the U.S. Army MP school at Fort Leonard Wood to go out and conduct themselves appropriately. Now, when we go out into combat, those combat MPs, I would almost say they're light infantry. They have the same capabilities and techniques. They understand. We spoke about weaponry before and their ability to conduct it. Now, if they have to conduct some form of law enforcement operations, they have that training, but that's not what they predominantly do in a military setting, in a combat setting, I should say. They're more focused on infantry type skills, if you will.
Okay, great. That's a good breakdown of where there's some differences, but also where there's some similarities.
Yes.
As a, lifelong civilian, never in the service, from what I understand, often your career path early in the military is chosen for you. Despite that, I want to ask, how did you get started on this? Way back in '88, did you pick it? Did it pick you? How did you find it as your first job? Obviously, you must have liked it. You've stuck with it for so long, rising to the ranks that you've risen to. How did you get started on this?
So let me go back. So what's great about today's military is young individuals coming in really have their own path to choose. They'll go in and they'll take what's known as the ASVAB, the Armed Service Vocational Aptitude Test, right, or battery. And depending how they do, they can pick their own career field. What branch of the service they wish to go into is really up to them. So, for example, my son, he's active duty in the Air Force and he's doing cyber. So what I try to tell young individuals looking to go in is really try to go in and do something that, if you're not going to stay in the military for a career, that you earn a marketable skill, that you can come out and apply that. So I think that's a good path. And I think that gives parents a lot of confidence for their young individuals or particularly their children that want to join. As far as me being in the reserves, a lot of times what will happen in the reserves is you're looking at proximity, geographical proximity. So if I join a reserve unit, how far am I willing to travel? So when I started off, I wanted to join the Marines. I wanted to go on active duty. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. Things didn't work out that way. So when I joined the Marines, the only reserve unit around me was a communications battalion. So I basically was a wireman. So if you picture somebody climbing a telephone pole, and for some of our younger people that might pay attention to this, they might not even know, right? But I had what was called a switchboard. You can go back to old movies, and I kind of plugged things in. It's not like it is today, right, with the internet and things like that. We didn't have the internet back in. And I had to climb with spikes in my boots, poles, and set up communications. And then again, the greatest thing that I'm going to tell your audience today about the military is mentorship, right? So somebody, saw me in my civilian capacity. He explained about the Army, what's called Officer Candidate School, or we call it OCS. And he thought that, it would be something that I might, want to try to attempt. So that was my switch from the Marine Corps over to the National Guard to attend this OCS. And again, he was a military police personnel. and the military police unit was in proximity to my home and my civilian occupation. So that is the branch that I chose, and it's been worthwhile. Now, in between, I've picked up some other branches: civil affairs, psychological operations, known today as information operations. But just like anything in life, right? The more educated you are, the more information that you have, you can use that. So in my capacity as a military police officer, to understand civil affairs, host nation, how to use information available to try to change behavior, I was able to use that during detention ops missions. So, for example, going into Iraq, I knew studying the 5 pillars of Islam, understanding the difference between Shia and Sunni, and understanding the Islamic religion. I was able to relate better with the detainees, to understand their customs and habits and the cultural nuances, and to explain that to my troops. I think it just made better. Also, I felt like I was playing human chess every day, because you had antagonists within the prison that were trying to basically cause disturbances and not allow our plan of just tranquility and peaceful settings to go forward. So by understanding that and using different forms of what I would call passing information out to let them know that these are the truths and the untruths, for example, quelling rumors. Rumors, for example, were that their families would come in and we weren't treating women with respect and dignity. So a simple taking the pictures of the tent that we use to show them that women proceeded down one side, men proceeded in the other. I had female guards checking women visitors. I had male guards, and then bringing that in and sitting down at meetings with detention operators, key leaders in the detention facility. We were able to quell that. So what I'm trying to say is, you shouldn't just be stovepiped. By gaining as much information and getting as much education in different branches, I was able to use that. And I think it was productive and helped me run detention operations camps.
Let me take a curveball off that just real quick, still on sort of the career type profile side, but you talk about the power of mentorship, and several of my other guests have talked about that. But one of the things you talked about was education, and you've got, a bachelor's, 5 masters, you're published, and you've got a PhD, plus you've got your reserve career, your civilian career. Do you have like some sort of power to, sleep fewer hours in the day or something like that? Like, what sort of productivity hacks or whatever you want to call it are you doing to get so much done in your life and your career? And are there anything within that you can share for people out there who want to get more done in their life?
Yeah. So, my wife will kid around with me now, but I'm retired. So she'll tell me, like I'm spending too much time looking at social media, but it's really just time management, right? So, first of all, I'm going to give you something right now that I think is key, and I pass this along. I work out every single day. I think I'm on year 13 or I'll start year 14. Well, I haven't missed a workout at all. Every single day, I devote 45 minutes to an hour of cardio and some form of weightlifting. I think it gets the system going. It keeps you young at heart and pushes you. So that's the first thing, right? So one of the things that Admiral Mullen years ago, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, spoke about, and I see it, and I've experienced it personally in my family, is we have an obesity problem in this nation. So one of the first things is, and particularly in the criminal justice field that I'm in, I'm telling young students, you go ahead and you're getting your degrees in academic study, but a lot of times you're going to have to go to an academy, a police academy, a state troop academy, and you're going to have to meet height, weight standards, and you're going to have to do some form of physical training. So incorporate that into your life and never lose it. Secondly, again, don't waste time. So even if I'm watching, an episode of whatever, we run a Seinfeld, or I want to watch a football game, I'll do that while I'm doing PT. So you can multitask, right? And just don't waste time. So when I was doing the war college, I had three young children, and my wife would go shop and I'd have a book in the car with me. And you know what else happened? My daughter started to realize Dad likes to read. So guess what? They follow what they see. So instead of me sitting there doing nothing, right? They see Dad reading a book. So read a book, use your time wisely. Think about what you can do. If you're on a train and you have to commute in the morning, that might be the time, again, to work it out. I like to think of things in long-term planning. So I kid around a lot about the American way, and then I look at the Eastern way. So the American way is I have to have it now. When I give mentorship, I talk about the Eastern way. Put things off. Have a 10-year plan, 10-year vision. So, for example, in some of my master's degrees, I didn't need it done like in 12 months. So I put together a 2 or 3 year plan where I was driving home from work and stopped off at West Point where they were giving classes like, once a week. And so I just said to myself, I'll put this master's together. I'll have it 3 years from now. Then I finished that. If I could find free education, and there was plenty of free education between the service I rendered being a veteran and some of the schools that were offering it, I took advantage of it. So why stop at 2? Why stop at 3? If somebody is going to give you a free education, you take it, period. All right. And it will never hurt. So I never want to sit, and I tell this to young people all the time. Never sit on that proverbial rocking chair when you're 70 years old and say, I should have done this. Do it. I don't care if you're 18 and you're saying, you know what, I like that girl over there, but I'm nervous. I should go ask her out. Ask her out. Okay. I'm 18 and I'm struggling. Should I go to airborne school or not go to airborne school? I'm nervous. Do it, because you never want to look back when you're 70 years old and said, you know what, I should have taken that fire department test. I should have applied to law school. I should have applied to medical school. Do it. Let somebody else tell you no. Okay, then you can live with yourself. And I've done this with my son, and thank God he's listened to me. And I said, all right, Brian, you didn't make it, but you tried. You know what? And that's all you can do. So I really encourage people. When I got back from Iraq and Afghanistan, I would speak to young soldiers. And I'd say, how many of you are afraid to go to college? And I would get a group of individuals that would raise their hand. I said, listen to me. You have been through basic training. Some of you have been to combat. You've done things that many other people in the world can't do. And I'm telling you, as somebody that sat through school, that is nothing. You're going to go through this, but they needed that voice of confidence, that vote to tell them that they could do it. And the only thing sometimes we do is build things up in our minds. So even those people right now that may watch this or hear this, you're 290 pounds and you're struggling with your weight. Just go out today. Tomorrow's the first day the rest of your life, okay? And you're not going to go out and run a marathon today. But you know what you can do? You can walk around the block once or twice, okay? And guess what? After 2 weeks, it's going to be 4 times. And then what you're going to be able to do is maybe run once around the block. You're not going to settle this today, but you have to have a long-term plan. And today is the first day of the rest of your life. And that's anybody that might be struggling with substance abuse, alcohol abuse, right? Do something. All right. Move the ball forward, as I like to say. So I love when I talk to my troops using sports analogies. Do something in your life to move the ball forward, whether you're going to lose weight, start an exercise program, start reading, go back to school, whatever the case may be. Don't sit there and be dormant. Don't sit there and not move the ball forward, if that makes sense.
It does. And it is very inspirational. And I appreciate you fielding that curveball, and it may lead to one more, but it takes me in mind some of what you said there of either like my first guest who I know and enjoy, he talks about some of the time management techniques you do. Like he watches TV while he works out, gets ready for Ironmans, so forth. There's obviously the cliche in our society of, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take and so forth. But I think it's a truism. And I think you're doubling down on that is you got to at least try. And then, the reading, even if it's maybe you want to read more, can you do a book a month, right? That's 12 books a year. That
you're not doing
compared
now.
to somebody who doesn't read over 5 years, over 10 years. Yeah.
And you'll find out, right? So I'm going to be honest with you. I was probably one of the worst students going up to high school. I mean, I graduated at the bottom of my class. I had to beg my way into college. But I had an epiphany, right? My father was telling me all along, but, I was smarter than him, at least in my mind, right? But education is the key way out. So, what I really feel sorry for, because I just experienced this. I'm teaching, and I had a football player in my class, and he was not really doing the work. But I got on the phone to him, and I said, hey, listen, you're going to the pros. And he still has a dream. And nobody wants to take the dream away from someone. But I said, you need a backup plan, because if you don't go to the pros, what are you going to do? And even if you go to the pros, you might get 3-4 years, and then you're going to be a young man when you finish. What are you going to do the rest of your life? It's your mind, right? And I don't care what you're doing, computer, nursing, I don't care, but use your mind and have a plan. So I almost feel bad with some of these colleges, and I'll say it might not be popular, but I'm going to say it anyway. Some of these colleges are mills. Some of these colleges are giving you degrees that are absolutely useless. So I'll pick on me. I'm an Irish American. And if I want to study my history, that's great. You know, I can take Irish culture. But what kind of job is that going to give me? I mean, is Dell or Fortune 500 going to hire me? Maybe they'll hire me in the next potato famine that might come. They'll say, we need an Irish guy that can tell us about potato famines. But otherwise, I'm not getting a job. That's something you can read on your own time. Get a marketable degree. Do something with computers, cyber, do something with nursing. I mean, these young 22-year-old nurses, and this is gender neutral because I have a friend of mine that I went to high school with and grammar school, and he's a New York City Fire Battalion chief. So there's nobody more macho than him. And he's a nurse, and he's doing nursing because he realizes this is a great financial way to work in my off time. But you're going to walk out of school at 22. That June, when you graduate, you can start that weekend at a $70,000 a year job. You can travel the world. You can go anywhere. Accounting, finance, do something marketable. You want to study anything about everything? I'm going to pick on myself because I don't want anybody to come off and say he's not politically correct. Males or Irish history. Read that on your own time. Getting that degree is not going to get you a job. Right. So, Go seek mentors, right? You're a young 18-year-old. You might not have a mentor in your life, but before you go and choose a major, look at the job market and see what's out there and do something productive. The other key thing, I say to my young people out there, and I talk to people my age now, because remember, I heard this one time and it really offended me about, basically I got everything handed, white privilege. No, I came from the Bronx, and the Bronx is not a high socioeconomic community. My father died when I was 16, and my mother raised us, basically. All right, and so there wasn't a lot, but going to work, okay, and saving your money. Save your money. Have some percentage of money that you're putting into some sort of savings account, high growth money. Because now I'm going to tell you the truth, right? In a lot of these civil service jobs that you go into today. Some have pensions, some don't. But a lot of them have what's known as deferred compensation. What that is they'll take money out and you invest it. And everybody I know that's done that is walking out with figures, and I don't want to get into the current economic situation because it's depressing for many of us, but these individuals have now accounts in the high 600, and some of them have made over $1 million in 30 years of investment. So they're living the middle class dream. They didn't come from money. They didn't have parents with hooks and everything else, but they took a simple civil service job and they did something with it and they saved their money. So the American dream is out there. And I'm not saying that just because, hey, I'm a white male and this is what everyone thinks that, money just falls out of trees onto me and everything happy. I have struggles too. Okay. And there isn't a person, and this is another key takeaway. You talk about mentorship, right? Is everybody has struggles. Everybody has something going on in their life, some form of a problem. Just because you see somebody walking down the street and, he or she may have a smile, the older you get, the more you'll understand that everybody has some form of difficulties, problems in their life. It's not rosy. And you can't sit there. And this is, I think, one of the problems I'm seeing in the young generation is, everybody wants to be a victim. Woe is me, woe is me. Guess what? You know what? It doesn't matter. All right. You're not going to get any special way in life. Everybody's been a victim. You look back at our World War II, our greatest generation, how many individuals came back disabled, mentally disabled, our fellow veterans in Korea. There was an old expression when I was growing up, right? You got to suck it up and move on. And today I think we want to be victims. And just tell me what you're getting out of that. I mean, seriously, right? What do you get, a T-shirt or something? I don't know. And I'm not making light of it. All I'm telling you is you've got to deal with the problems because other people have them. And I think one of the greatest things I ever saw was if you hadn't had a chance, look at the movie Black Hawk Down. All right. And we had a chance to hear one of the great Delta Force operators in that, and he spoke live. And he knew that night things weren't going good. And he just had a come to Jesus moment with himself and reflected and said, you got to snap out of it. And I think we've all been. There's nobody I know that hasn't had some form of depression or things are not going good for you, where once in a while you've just got to stop yourself and go, get out of this. Get out of this rut. And again, I go back to physical fitness, all right? Because you know what? There's nothing like it. And I tell everybody I know, when you're having a bad day, get your damn sneakers on and go for a run. And you'll find out after an hour, burning it out, you're going to feel a whole lot different. So I feel bad for those people that, get stuck on the couch and get into that woe is me syndrome. You got to break out of it. Because guess what? Nobody's going to help you like you're going to help yourself. Nobody's going to manage your career, as we say in the military. Nobody's going to manage your life like you are. Life is good. It's out there, but you got to take it. Nobody's going to give it to you, right? You're not going to stand there at your door one day and some beautiful, be it, girl or some handsome looking guy is going to knock on your door and say, where have you been all my life, right? That's not the way it works. And that's not the way it's going to work with your education, your job, or anything else. You've got to go take it to life. And if you do, you'll be successful. But if you don't, you're going to sit on that couch and you're going to wallow in your own sympathy.
Well, and blending that point, which I think is a good one, with your earlier point about, taking that step. Let's say you have, for whatever reason, you've gone through some sort of hardship. You've been truly victimized, of a crime or something like that. You've lost a loved one, whatever the case might be, and maybe you're struggling to figure out how to get out of it. You talked about snapping out of it. For you, helping yourself is physical fitness. Maybe somebody, maybe they have a major injury and they can't, whatever it is. But I think one of the other things as we look as a society to try to destigmatize mental health challenges and other challenges is not merely giving in, as you say in a bit of a different term, to that sort of misery, but weirdly taking ownership of it. And if you need help, there's people in the world and there's resources in the world that can help, but they aren't going to just magically show up at your door either. Just like that, beautiful person you mentioned, the mental health professional's not going to just come knock on your door. The food bank, if you're having financial struggles, the food bank is not going to go door to door looking for who they can give food to. So we're blessed, I think, in this country. We've got a lot of resources, but they aren't coming to you. You've got to at least do something to get out to those resources. If you can't help yourself, and there are some people who can't, you still have to, because you have to take the steps. I mean, is that fair enough, do you think?
No, without question. I'm not making like, someone here could say, hey, you've been fortunate. You've never lost a limb or a leg. And no, I haven't been the victim of a crime where someone shot me. And, of course, I've been the victim of some forms of crimes and things of that nature. What I'm suggesting, though, is this, right? You get one life. So, I'll always, and I read, current events and the stories, and people want to be victims. You get one life. This is it, right? And you can go through life and say how bad life is treating me and how unfair. Now, I'm talking about the average Joe. We have people that I fully understand have deep mental issues, deep physical issues. I'm not suggesting by any means they're in the same position. But people that want to go ahead and be the victim and blame, again, Occupy Wall Street. Look at all these rich people, right? Got it. You know what? I'm not in the NBA. I'm not getting paid $472,000 a game. Would I like to? Of course. But you know what? I'm an old white guy that can't jump, and that's okay. But I've done something. So look at the talents, right? I mean, so I have met those individuals that are in wheelchairs that have gone on to medical school and law school, right? I mean, I worked in a courthouse where I saw people with disabilities that became lawyers, and they didn't let that hold back. I've seen different genders, right? I mean, basically, when I grew up, and I'm not being insulting, right? There were two genders, right? Women weren't always, as popular in fields, right? So I saw that, how women came into the workforce and are now doing great things in the military, fire departments, doctors, and all, right? So, and then again, I've seen minorities, right? I mean, I loved it. I worked for African-American judges, African-American generals, right? And it's fabulous to see it. I worked for female generals. So there's no reason to sit there and go that you can't be anything. And, I raised 2 daughters, and I told them the same thing. The world is yours. It's what you want to do with it. I had one young daughter, the one in the military. I encouraged her to go to Ranger School because she's a physical fitness nut. And then I also was trying to, I guess, live to her vicariously because I couldn't fly, but I encouraged her to go to flight school. So I'm not just putting this out there. I firmly believe in that. It's what you want to do. And for those of you that are struggling, go ask for the help. There's nothing wrong. The worst thing you can do, though, is sit there, right? And I've seen this. I've gone to people's homes where you're sitting in the darkness and you turn into alcohol and drugs. Because guess what? After you come down from that high and you wake up the next morning and you're all hungover, and as an Irish guy, know what being hungover is, guess what? The problem's still there. The problem is still there. So you've got to get yourself out of the rut. Right. And I know it might feel good, drinking a few shots and some Stellas, or if you're smoking pot or whatever it is you're doing. But guess what? Next day, there it is all again. So whether you're unemployed, overweight, you're not moving up in your job, you've got to make that change. Mm-hmm. I think it was Albert Einstein that said, right, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So you've got to make that change. Whether it's education, switching jobs, losing weight, changing your wardrobe, getting a different hairstyle, doing something productive that's you're going to sell yourself and do something that you're going to feel confident with.
Yeah,
and I know we've gotten off the military.
And you mentioned something in there.
But I think this is important for your viewers as well, especially if it's a younger audience.
No, I think that the name of the podcast is No Bad Questions. If we go on a tangent about stuff about trying to get people motivated and even if it's just motivated to get the help they need, that's fine. And so I'm enjoying the conversation. I hope listeners are as well. One of the things that you mentioned in there that I kind of want to, I think it's a good opportunity to sort of tackle head on, right, is maybe you're not moving up in your job, maybe you're not moving up in your career, and that's frustrating, and trying to own that. And maybe there's 1,000 different reasons. And I think right now, one of the commonly discussed reasons is, kind of out there in the national conversation is, perhaps, discriminatory reasons and things like this. But a lot of careers, as you move up in seniority, you move away from technical and more into people skills. And you also sometimes, as the more senior jobs become more scarce, the role or the choices for promotion and so forth get more political. And I don't mean like red team, blue team political. I just mean there's 4 of you who are directors or colonels or whatever, vying for one vice president or for one general spot, right? And there's going to be some lowercase p politics to that. And so, do you see that in the military as well? And B, does that tie back to what you were saying about, hey, if you need to tweak something about the education you've got, maybe it shouldn't be this way, but it is. Your physical appearance, are you coming to the table, coming to the meetings, looking professional, dressing the part, as they say, are all these a component that you feel is accurate in what you've seen as you've risen in your career? And, are those, because I think those are things people can own and really take advantage of. And yes, are there times when the class favorite is going to get selected ahead of you? Maybe. But if you can at least own all the components that are in your control, the likelihood of that, I think, diminishes. What are your thoughts on that?
So I'll be frank, right? And I can speak a little more freely now being retired, but I'll give it to you, right? So, no matter where you go, if I went and applied, and I always use this example, to the Tampa Bay bus company, to the San Diego Zoo, I'm going to walk in and 15% of the people are going to hate me. I didn't even show up yet, and they're just going to hate me, right? Some people are going to say, hey, look at this. He got the job. Mm-hmm. He's a white male, right? And then you'll get white men that'll sit over to the side and said, look, they hired a female, or they hired a minority and they're not really deserving. I'm deserving, right? Well, how did she get the job? Did she sleep her way to the top? She's sleeping with this guy. So there's always going to be that, right? Let's go back to what I said originally, right? Leave no stone unturned. So I wanted to make general officer, right? And I wanted to be a chief clerk. And I said, that's why I went for the degrees, because I didn't want to sit on that proverbial rocking chair and say, oh, you know what, I should have done something more. And I do the same mentorship with young individuals and officers coming up. The other thing I did was deployments, right? If you look at me as a career reservist, I did 6 deployments, including 4 into combat zones. Because at the end of the day, right, I mean, if you want to be on the football team, you got to get into the game. And so first of all, the experience I got was just, wow, I can't even put it into words. I may write a book one day, I'm not sure, just about what I did, but I wanted to leave no stone unturned. So there is a certain amount of politics, and you're going to have to deal with that. That's just reality, right? And they're not going to teach you that at college. But if you're doing everything you should do, right? So I'll get these other people, right? I mean, so I worked civil service. The job was 9 o'clock to 1 o'clock. You went to lunch at 1, came back at 2, and then you left at 5. The people that put 0 into an organization are going to get 0 out. So you've got to show willingness. So like when I was with the military and I was working for free sometimes. At the courts, if I needed to stay late, I stayed late. If I needed to come early or work through lunch, that's what I did, right? And I know the unions don't want to hear that, but you've got to put something in. So it's the same way, right? You want to start on your high school basketball team. You're going to have to do extra laps. You're going to stay out there in your driveway till 9:30 at night practicing foul shots. But if you're going to do the minimum, you're going to get the minimum, all right? And that's what life at all. And you've got to go back in, and the world has changed, right? I can't tell you what it's like to be a female. I can't tell you what it's like to be a black male. I've had these discussions with my troops. I could not fathom what it would have been like to serve in Vietnam as an African American, come home, and then I can't eat lunch at a counter. But yet some white guy that didn't go to Vietnam, he can be served at a counter. So there was a time that this country was discriminatory. I don't see that. And I can tell you right now, I sat on boards and I've had young African Americans that I've mentored. At the end of the day, right, especially in the military, it's all about we want to win and we want to stay alive. So I don't need to fill it up with a bunch of white males. If you asked me to pick an all-star team that I was going to go to war with right now, you wouldn't see a bunch of white Irish guys. You would see a very diverse team mixed with Hispanic, Latinos, and I don't know in today's world, what we call them. I know what I do. Good damn Americans, right? You'd see African Americans, you'd see women and men, and I'd go to combat with them. So it wouldn't be all people that look like me. If I want to win and take and serve well, that's who it would be made up of, because that's what America's diversity is great. And so don't sit there. That's the only thing I would say, right? If you want to sit there as a young minority, and I'd say this, and some people would say he's got some nerve to comment about that, but I would say to you this, right? Okay, you can go ahead and say, I'm not going to get ahead because I'm a minority, but remember, you got one life. And if you're going to go through life like that and think like that and act like that and you don't get ahead, fine, but you're not going to get a redo on this, okay? Let's just assume for argument's sake that is the case. We'll assume that, right? At the end of the day, it's still your one life, okay? And if that's the way it is, and you're a young person and you have orange hair or something, and they're not going to hire you, then fine. Then what do you need to do to change that, right? What do you need to do? And how come others are progressing, right? So I tell people, right, and I know it might not be popular, but I say when you go to interviews, and I give this to everyone, including my own kids, and this is the thing I want everyone in the audience to understand. I'm not saying this to anybody that I wouldn't say this to my young kids, but you got to go in, right? And I was always taught, high school, I told you I did horrible, but there's one thing they taught me. When you go for an interview, be early, be dressed, be clean shaven, and get a haircut, right? That has changed today. I was just talking to a young student the other day who I have a lot of respect for. I think this individual has a great career looking at federal law enforcement, and that individual had some jewelry I suggested that she not wear. Okay. So, again, that's just my take. People may not agree with that. But I've told my son, right, who's got a nice big tattoo, I said, Brian, no more tattoos. You start putting tattoos in areas that you shouldn't, you may not get that job. Clean up your social media. I'm at events and I never take a picture with a beer in my hand because that's what the public's going to see. When something goes wrong, that's what they're going to see. And I've seen individuals do that. So clean up your social media. You don't have to take pictures with empty Jack Daniels and doing keg stands because when some department goes back to look at your social media, right? And listen, everybody I know, senior police officials, generals in the military, they all did that at 19 and 20 as well. So we're not perfect. But again, we're in a different world, right? I didn't grow up with social media. Don't do those things. Don't put yourself in positions to give somebody that says no, right? You see other kids on social media today, right? They have guns in their hand, knives. I mean, God, what are you thinking? You're giving yourself a bad chance. So do all those things, get rid of that stuff, clean yourself up. And you know what's unfortunate in many cases, there might not be a male figure in a home. So males have, a different disadvantage. So, how do you dress? I've seen pictures. It's all over social media where people have to show young individuals how to put a tie on, right? So get that mentorship. Find a male person in your community, be it the church, your baseball coach, whatever, and say, hey, sir, I'm going to an interview. What do you think? And I tell people, and I was just helping a kid, a young individual. He was looking at West Point. And, I gave him some factors. I said, go to YouTube. These are some of the questions that are going to be asked. We call it in the military a murder board, right? So have your friends and parents put you in front of a desk and ask you some questions that you may go through in an interview, right? Simple stuff. Tell me about yourself. What do you want to work for this company? What do you like? What do you not like? But you get used to answering those questions, and we're not doing that. Again, the military has offered, and I think it's the greatest thing we have is mentorship. And I think I've seen it in colleges. We're failing. We get their money, they graduate, and that's it. So we need programs, and I've offered to go speak to colleges and put it to my students. Call me up, and I've had a few students take advantage, and I was very open and honest with them. And again, some of them could hang up the phone and be offended, but the same thing I'm telling them, I'm telling my children. So it's just about me giving you what my advice is. You can do what you want. It's your life. Listen, I can tell you what to do. I suggest you get a nice haircut. You want to come in there braided or whatever. And that's up to you. But I'm trying to give you the best advice forward that I can.
I appreciate your perspectives, and I appreciate your candor. And one of the things you mentioned in there is that you feel that one of the best things in the military, the benefits, is mentorship. And let's move a little bit towards recruitment and the benefits of a military career and so forth now, as we get into the last third of our time. So I think most people know about the pay and the pension and the GI Bill and the opportunity to go to college paid for and so forth. And maybe they don't know some intangible benefits. And you mentioned one. Mentorship. What are other intangibles that maybe people don't realize about a military career?
It's simple things, right? How to conduct yourself. I've read on social media, right? There's so many things out there that you don't have to pay money for, go to school, work ethic, right? Be on time, be early, be dressed appropriately. So, I had a young son, right? And he was an individual that I thought shouldn't go to college. And I think he had the academic ability, but he wasn't pushing forward. Similar to me, right? So chip off the old block. But I thought the military would be good. And I'll tell you right now, I'm so proud of him. He's finished his associates. He's working on his bachelor's, top secret clearance, cyber. He's done that. And he's looking, and the way he talks, I'm not talking to a 21-year-old anymore. I feel like I'm talking to a 28-year-old. Because sometimes, especially in our culture, they don't listen. Young people don't listen to their parents, but they'll listen to their peers, right? And it's crazy because their peers are just as confused as they are. But the peership in the military might be an 18-year-old dealing with a 22-year-old or a 21-year-old dealing with a 26-year-old. And it's working, right? Because, when a lot of people don't have the understanding, but years ago, you'd find maybe people that were finishing their duty day in the military may go out for a few beers. And that's not to say it doesn't happen now. But basically what you're finding is they're going into the gyms. On every base throughout the United States, there's some form of college or there's online college, and that's what they're doing. They're sitting in a group and it's like, what do you mean, Billy, you're not enrolled? Or Susan, what do you mean you're not enrolled in a college? Come on, man, you want to move ahead. You got all this free money. So it's like a peer pressure, but instead of doing something stupid, it's to do something positive with yourself. And that's what's going on, right? So, and again, they come out like, again, my son had to go back up to New York. We had death in the family. And people that saw him at the wake and funeral couldn't believe this was the same kid, just by his yes, sir, yes, ma'am, his decor, his ability to interact with people, his IPC skills, interpersonal communication skills have improved vastly. And his confidence and the way he conducts himself and the way he deals with people. So, listen, I've gone to schools, right? And often, recruiters will have different times at school. And I'm not a recruiter, although everyone in the military is a recruiter. And I said, the number one question you should ask me is, if it's so good, how come your kids aren't? And mine are. And you're finding more and more senior leaders in the military do have their young children or nephews and nieces in the military. And we encourage that. Why? If it was that bad, why would we have our children? And instead of saying, let's get some other children, we want our children in it because it's such a positive atmosphere. Now, I think we've had our problems over the last couple of years with some situations. I think in some cases we've gone a little political, and we should stay out of that, period. And I think it's been detrimental. There's been surveys that reflect that as well, because the agreement we have with the American public is, we'll defend this nation and we'll win America's wars. And that's what we should be doing. And I think, unfortunately, on both sides of the aisle, they've involved us politically. And I think, some of the more senior leaders and the more educated leaders have asked senior leaders to refrain from getting involved in politics. And it can be difficult, but I think it's important for the trust of the American public in its military.
Trust is a currency that you earn slowly and spend quickly, right? And so to your point about that undermining of trust, it doesn't take a lot to burn it up, to spend it. And so I think some of what you're talking about with the impacts of that are from articles I read, are definitely impacting the recruitment landscape. And I also think that that's in a year where a lot of us are perhaps more cognizant than ever about the need to have a sufficient and satisfactory and strong military capability. There can be many reasoned debates about how much we need to be forward deployed in bases around the world and so forth and so on, about the makeup of the military and all these different things. But the ability to protect our national interests in a world where we've got, a land war in Europe now, and China saber rattling and outright, making a lot of defiance at the UN and things like this. I think a lot of us who are paying attention to the global affairs are concerned and about that state of things. And then you add in the recruitment problem, and maybe we get double concerned. So the recruitment was definitely something I want to talk to you about, and I think we're segueing well into that. What can be done to help improve the recruitment gap in the country?
I think we just sell ourselves, right? I think we stay out of politics, right? And we don't get involved. We follow the tried and true things that have worked in the past. I understand it is a different generation. I'll be frank with you. I sometimes have difficulty relating to this generation. But I don't also believe we give in. I think people are joining the military to be different, to be unique. And so I don't want to bring the standards down. I think we hold to it, give them the challenges, physically and mentally, that they're coming in. I think the other piece is we have to look at ourselves as a nation, right? So some people are talking about free colleges, where we want to do free college and forgive student loan debt. And you talk to people in my generation, and I think, we get upset by that because we had to earn it. But also, if you continue to give things free away, then why join the military? If I'm an 18-year-old person and some of these companies, for the example, Starbucks or Target, and I know Dolly Parton and an amusement park give workers to educate, but at least they're doing something, right? And there's a benefit to it.
Right.
But if we give something for nothing, why? So I kind of liked where I came from in New York State. And this is particularly for poor individuals, right? That say, I can't, pay for college. And the CUNY, City University of New York and State University of New York, were relatively cheap, I thought. But even if you can't afford it, if you join the National Guard, they'll give you free education. So you're getting a benefit. You're getting a free education. You're getting a military skill, a trade, And at least the people, the taxpayers, are getting something back. The other thing is there's volunteer fire departments or EMS, or we could have people do Meals on Wheels. Reading is fundamental. So I think there should be some form of national service. Now, I'm not suggesting a draft, because as a senior leader in the military, if you don't want to be in the military, I don't want you in. I'm not here to babysit you. I mean, I'll help you along, but I don't want people that, are doing drugs and you're just going to, the judge is going to say, listen, you got 12 years in state prison and you go into the military. We're away from that, and I don't want it. But I also feel there should be some form of service in the nation, because this way we all start out, right? If everybody has to do 2 years, whether you come from a wealthy family, a poor family, regardless of your race, creed, or color, everybody does something. And then we could have different benefits. So, for example, people that do the military might get free education. People that, don't do reading is fundamental. Maybe we can give them nursing degrees, and they have to stay within a challenged socioeconomic area and practice medicine. So there are things we can do publicly to alleviate some of the issues we're having in the nation. Jobs to include, and then help people that are not as advantaged as others to get that reading, to get that mentorship, to get food, as we spoke about, right? Diet's a big part of it. And also to get the medical care that they have, to give them a fair advantage, like others that may not have that. And we can do that through various programs with our young people now.
All right. Last question then for the day. We've spoken to folks who maybe need some motivation. We've spoken to young folks who maybe are considering a military career. Let's talk to folks who maybe are in the middle, who are leaders, who have people under them, that they're managing or leading. What advice, civilian or otherwise, do you have for folks like that who have people in their care, whose careers are in their hands, things like that? What advice do you have to those leaders out there in the country today?
So they're watching you, right? Everything you do is, people are watching you. And I've sat in positions, where, I may have had judges over me and I watched their behavior. So when I was leading, they're going to watch you on the 2-mile run. This was the old Army physical fitness test, right? So they're going to watch how many push-ups they're going to count. Be out there with them, do what they do. But the most important legacy I think that I did that really helped people was mentorship, right? So I would give briefs on, how to be me. And not that I'm full of myself, how to be John Hussey, but how do I get to be a battalion commander? How do I get to be a brigade commander? How do I compete for general officer? A lot of my peers weren't doing that. So I would put them, when I traveled in road shows, or I would have individuals come together, I would do that. I would bring in other people to help develop them. For example, speakers from Sean McFader, a renowned scholar in the military, would come in and speak to them. I'd have retired generals come in. So they cared. And one of the things that I always got through my senior years of feedback was, hey, sir, you took the time, you were interested in me. And nobody cares more. And I did that in my civilian work too, right? I took people that I saw, right? Not the people that came in at 9 and left at 5, but the people I saw had ambition and they were caring about the organization. I tried to mentor them as best I could and give them a chance. And a lot of them have developed into deputy chief clerks and chief clerks in the court system. So a lot of times you're not seeing that in civilian organizations and in policing agencies. So I would say to anybody out there, you'll know who your Jedis are, who are the people that are showing, and be fair. I had the Abu Ghraib prison. We spoke about that before. And I was very keen on how minorities viewed things, particularly UCMJ actions. And one thing that I had, and one of the best compliments I got out, was from a New York City Latino detective. He came up to me and he said, "Sir, you were tough, but you were fair." Right? So individuals that came before me, just because you were a white male doesn't mean I was giving you a free pass. You got caught sleeping in a guard tower. The same punishment that I gave to a white male, I gave to a female African-American. The standard was the same. So whole standards across the board the same, because especially in today's environment, people are watching and they're going to look at you. And, throughout, I think, my legacy, people will say that, I was fair. I didn't care what you looked like. I didn't care what your gender was. As a matter of fact, I know in my last group that I had, some of my top performers were female. My number one battalion commander out of 25 was a female, and that's the way we ranked it. That's how her evaluation was written. My number one command sergeant major was a female. And that's just the way it was because they were the best, and that's how I wrote it up. So be fair because you're going to be watched, mentor your people, lead your people, enjoy it. It's all about that. I used to have the good, the bad, and the ugly list, right? And I'll just, call your people when good things happen. For example, I remember being in Guantanamo Bay. A young soldier was all happy. His wife just delivered a baby. I called the wife in the emergency room. I didn't get it, but I left a message. And I always had time for people in my command that died. I had 14,000. But all my commanders knew if I lost a soldier, I got on the phone with that family member, be it suicide, a car accident, or whatever the case may be. You spend the time and you just, 20 minutes to a half an hour, you wipe your table clean and you be prepared to talk about that young person that died. And those are the key aspects of leadership, right? Just caring about your people. How do you want to be treated? It's the golden rule. And then, I've had some great leaders I've learned from in the past, and you've also got to learn from poor leadership. All right. But the other thing too, and I'm kind of struggling with this is I'm in academia now. I won't lower my standard. And I think that's what I'm seeing out there now too, is keep your standards high. And some of the students I had didn't appreciate it, but I got a couple of emails. Hey, professor, I see why you were doing this. It wasn't personal, but you were trying to make us better students. So, keep the ball high and continue to lead your people and just, they'll appreciate it in the long run.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for that to wind us up here at the end, or to wrap us up here at the end. Major General John Hussey, thank you for joining me. We talked about a lot of great stuff today. I really appreciate it. And thank you for your service. And I hope that you enjoy your new life in academia as well. Thank you, sir.
Well, David, thank you. And I thank the audience, and I hope you get something out of it. And hey, seriously, anyway, anybody having a problem out there, if you can contact David, he can contact me. If I can help you in any way, I'm here for you. Well, thank you.